As Petty Officer Ashcroft let the embers of his capstan draw out, he looked across the seemingly never-changing landscape of blues, greens, and greys. The smell of salt and oil, a combination he was now all too familiar with, hung heavy in the air, and he pondered what was to become of him upon his return to the city, to Glasgow, to home. Of course, it hadn't been home to him for a long time now. The war had made sure of that. It also provided a distraction from the conditions many had lived in the years prior. But the war was over now, and the hardships of the city dwellers remained. Ashcroft had seen firsthand what a war could do to a city, and was not optimistic the situation would have improved in his absence. However, a glimmer of hope remained for Ashcroft, for in the light of the recent defeat of fascism, there lied a true testament to what could be accomplished by the collective state. For if the state could defeat the Nazis, surely they could also overcome the sons of the 30s. Alas, only time will tell.
Land ho! Land ho!
Upon his return from war, Ashcroft promptly resumed his life from where he had left it, and despite his fears, little had changed of Govanhill. Shortly after his receipt of the conscription letter, Ashcroft had handed in his notice to Colville Steelworks, the largest in Scotland at the time. However, the company soon welcomed him back with open arms. Work had slowed in recent years, a shortage in coking coal necessary for the steel's production, Ashcroft suspected. Nonetheless, he had risen to foreman, and was now on the cusp of bringing his family into the middle class. Whilst nothing had changed in Govanhill, the thought that this wasn't necessarily a good thing had long lingered on Ashcroft's mind. The walls of his tenement remained cramped, and the windows' provision of light would have been laughable, were it not for the damp they caused. Furthermore, his child's increasing numbness to the vermin had begun to alarm both him and his wife. Something needed to change. While at work, he had heard his boss talking about Motherwell, although not the old Motherwell. No. Ashcroft distinctly heard the man call it a town of the future. High-rises were to be built there, whole plots of the things. This was both to alleviate the pressure Glasgow was experiencing in the wake of its dire housing situation, and also to provide housing for a newly acquired workforce, soon to replace Ashcroft's native Glasgow one. In 1955, Ravenscraig Steelworks was born, and the Motherwell high-rises soon followed. Ashcroft soon moved to the high-rise, a practice that was becoming more and more common with every year. It seemed like any new structure was almost always a tower block. They were popping up everywhere, like mushrooms, you would say. He knew, of course, this was in part due to a proclivity of the post-war government to reserve much-needed space for farmland. Building upwards was the immediate solution. Other factors, such as the introduction of the tower crane and the government's 1957 subsidies, made the construction almost as economic as it was rapid. However, it wasn't long before the high-rise's reputation came crashing down. The subsidies ceased in '67, and so the construction stagnated. Corbusier's plan to create free-flowing spaces from street to lobby, whilst admirable in theory, ultimately failed, and instead provided a breeding ground for crime. People became afraid to leave their own flats. Privatisation, poor maintenance, and lack of investment led the building to decay to the point a pathology emerged. It was the high-rises themselves which caused such poor quality of life. Such mindsets would inevitably lead to their demise.